All right, Andrew. So the upcoming album is Tilt at the Wind No More. And, it's nice to have a full album coming. Everything seems so EP and single based right now.
Yeah.
What could you kind of tell us about this group of songs and also the decision to, put out an album, which is actually kind of a decision these days, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the second question. You know, I took obviously, I mean, not intentionally, I didn't intentionally take a lot of time off, but I had originally started working on music right after I got back from the Upside Down Flowers tour in 18, early 19. And the intention was really to put a follow-up out to that record almost immediately. And then we know what happened. The world kind of shut down. And I was in this interesting position where I had started work on a book, and I had a deal in place to do that. Was wondering, even when I made the deal, when am I ever going to have the time to really execute? And then 2020 happened, and it was like, okay, we're going to be locked down. I'm going to be able to just be in a space and write and really figure out not just how to write how to write a book, what to write it about, and what I'm digging into. So I really took a couple of years off of music in general. I think I wrote and released one song, maybe two in that period of time. And then as the lights started coming back on, and I had sort of unburdened myself, I think, of this sort of massive body of work and tying up all these loose ends from my past. I was so excited to get back to making music, and I think it felt like the moment that I was in, approaching my 40th birthday and having in this span of time tipped over into, being in the music industry for more than half of my life and making records for more than half my life, it just sort of felt fated to make a record, to make a reflective piece of music. These songs, I think, are in a lot of ways are kind of an outcropping of what I learned from writing the book. That it's wired into my DNA to sort of seek out struggle and challenges. Sometimes that's healthy, sometimes it's not, right? And I think a lot of the songs on this record sort of really put a lens on some of those moments in my past. And I think because of where I'm at in life, I was able to look at that with a little less judgment. I think because I also spent so much of my time when I was writing the book making peace with that it had a sort of, there was a different perspective to kind of write from. And that felt like an album to me, as the songs started kind of gathering steam and we were in the studio. It made sense to me that this would be a body of work. And frankly, I was having so much fun that to cut it off after a song or two or an EP's worth of music, it was just like, I wanted to make this record with Tommy and Jeremy. We just had so much fun in the studio that it just made sense to go all the way.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about working with those two producers, because obviously you've been doing this long enough where you don't need a producer. You could go in and do this yourself. Why do you still want to work with a producer, and what did those two particular guys, bring to the process this time?
Well, for the record, I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I do feel like I need a producer. I've always felt that way. I think, especially in this phase of my career where, I'm not like bringing a band into the studio with me. I haven't really done that for a long time, but I really crave collaboration. I think there's so much, and so much of the Wilderness Project is rooted in this idea that by pairing off with different people and learning their language, right, and learning how they speak music and what inspires them, when you find the right people to do that with, you make something new, right? And for me, that's why I make music. It's why I do this still, is like, if I wanted to repeat myself, I could have done that a million times. But I think what keeps me in this and keeps me excited is like, how do I make, one of my songs feel fresh to me? And how do I create a delivery system that I find exciting and worth the time? And so, yeah, I mean, Tommy, I'd worked with he helped me finish the Zombies on Broadway record. He did Brooklyn, You're Killing Me and Island Radio on that record. And we clicked, and then it was over, right? So I've always been looking for another opportunity to be back in the room with him. Jeremy is an old friend. He played in my band when we first kind of went out under my own name before The Wilderness was a part of the moniker. When I was had put out the EP with Synesthesia and Catching Cold and a few of those other songs on there. Jeremy was in the band. He kind of took a hard turn into production, and we've stayed friends for all those years. But he went on to work with Rick Rubin and Kid Harpoon. He just got 3 Grammys for his work on the new Harry Styles record. Like he's a beast, an amazing engineer and producer. And so I started, it was just me and Tommy, and then Tommy heard a song that I had written with Jeremy, and he was like, we should get that kid in here to work. And the rest is history. We just like holed up for a few months in a studio and kind of ran around like just like little kids, it was like, oh, go run over there, hit that drum, like let's sing now, and it was just this kind of frenetic, beautiful dance that led to the making of the songs.
Yeah. Looking ahead to the, the live schedule you have in front of you, the show, the local one we have here is Rockwood Music Hall, which is, really small, and it's interesting to look down a little bit and you see like Bonnaroo. So, I know bands do that all the time. They go from small room to big room, this and that, but kind of how do you approach that? I mean, some people say, oh, it doesn't matter, but other people, maybe they're not telling the truth. I don't know.
I think that for me, being able to play a diverse sort of set of buildings is actually really important. I love being on a festival stage in front of 10,000 people. There are a few things that are a bigger rush, and when it goes well, it's like getting off a really great roller coaster ride. The beauty of small rooms is that I think there is this availability of a really deep bond that you can create with an audience. It's a weirdly more dangerous format in the sense that so much is falling, especially when I'm playing alone. Like I'm at Rockwood, it'll be me. Maybe Bobby might come down and play guitar with me for some of that show. But I just got back from Australia where I played small rooms, just me and the piano, and it was magic, right? Because you have to steer so intentionally when you're making music in a room like that, because you can hear every time somebody gets a drink poured. You can hear if you've lost somebody in the back of the room and they're talking to their friends, and I think that inspires a really high level of present-mindedness and intention that I think is really special. So I sort of like, I feel like you can't have one without the other, right? I get burnt out if I just play big rooms. I get burnt out if I just play small rooms. So we're mixing it up and trying to do a little bit of everything over the course of the next year.
Yeah. It wasn't too long ago you did a bunch of dates with Billy Joel, which what was that like?
Talk about a rush. I mean, getting on stage in a football stadium that's full of people is like, I mean, these last 2 that we did with him this summer, I was a little more ready for it because we had done a couple of summers ago. We were able to do 4 or 5 with him. The first time I walked on to, we played, I think, SunTrust baseball stadium with him in Atlanta. I felt like I blacked out in like the first minute. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, it's just sort of like waking up at the keys and going, did I mess anything up? Like, how do I keep myself grounded? And on top of that, playing for Billy Joel just carries such a weight for me because he was really my first musical idol. My first, like, once I started writing music, right? Like growing up, it was like, I loved Michael Jackson, and I had those sort of formative, you're 5, 6 years old, but as a piano player, the Billy Joel, like my parents gave me the Greatest Hits Volume 1 and 2, like when they saw me writing songs at the piano when I was 9, and he quickly became sort of my most listened to and my most studied, my very first concert. And so yeah, it checked 2 boxes. It's like I got to play the football stadium and I got to do it with somebody I grew up idolizing, who still is such a master of his craft and just like such a great performer. So it was fun and scary and super rewarding.
Did you get much of an opportunity to, talk with him, or was he kind of off in his own isolation?
No, he was very generous with his time. I mean, I think maybe in the 6 or 7 shows that we did with him, I probably only had 1 or 2 of those that I didn't see him. And and conversely, I mean, even the last show we played, he was like, he came to the stage during sound check and hung out with the whole band, and then was waiting for us when we got off stage to, to say good job and to catch up for a little longer. It was, a real, I've had artists both as a fan starting to go see shows that really treated me with respect as a fan, right? And I've had artists that I've gotten to tour with that I've really respected that have done the same. And he was just another in this lineage of artists that I've been lucky to interact with on both sides of the coin as a peer and as a fan, that really cement, my approach to how I deal with fans and opening acts and people that we travel with, because it can be a lonely world if you don't embrace the people that you travel with, and he was a real gentleman in that regard.
That's good, because I mean, that probably could go wrong sometimes. They say don't meet your heroes, the cliche, but it probably comes true sometimes.
I look, I'm very familiar with that adage, and I also will say it has rarely been the case for me. I feel like, and maybe music is just different. I think it requires so much collaboration, and it requires spending time with so many people. And I think it also requires a certain level of personal fandom, right? I mean, if you are a popular singer, you have those people in your life that you idolize. And so I do feel like in most cases, when I've met heroes of mine, they've been almost more kind than I would have ever expected them to be, and I feel I'm pretty fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. In addition to Billy Joel, were there any kind of like singing piano players that you kind of felt influenced by growing up, or even, as you progress through your career, other people, come about? Did have any of those caught your ear over the years? And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, kind of coming up through just like my adolescence and into high school, there obviously Elton John, Billy Joel, huge, Bruce Hornsby, certainly Ben Folds. Those Ben Folds 5 records were like, they hit right when I was sort of in prime time, going to my first concerts and getting my first car and being able to drive around and listen to what I wanted to in my CD player. And he was a huge inspiration to me, especially in that era where there really, we had Fiona Apple, who was amazing. Yeah. There wasn't like a lot in the way of like rock and roll piano, right? I think that era was a little starved for it. You had these amazing female piano singer songwriters like Sarah McLachlan and Fiona. But I think what I loved about Ben Folds 5 was that they really were. It was edgy and it was quirky and it was rock and roll, right? Right. And I grew up, listening to the piano playing rock and roll guys, right? And I craved that, and he checked that box for me, and I think made me feel, oh, it's possible that I could start like a rock band and have it succeed, and I really tip my hat to him for paving the way for a lot of us that followed.
Yeah. Looking at your career, it's kind of easy to break it into, the three obvious segments. It's something corporate, Jack's Mannequin, and now what you're doing, Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. If you were to indulge me and follow through that thread, if you could just briefly, for some, let's say someone's never listened to you at all, how would you kind of sum up each of those kind of subheadings?
I mean, I think in a very linear way, as it relates to the stages of life, right? I mean, something corporate, especially in the beginning and the genesis of it as an idea and as a band, was we were just capturing what it was like to be teenagers and to sort of, we sort of came of age slowly through that process, right? It was like, almost outgrew ourselves in a way. You go from the early demos and EPs and the first record, and it really is like us transitioning out of high school and into the world, but like still having all that kind of young kid energy, right? And and then as you move into North, I think you start getting like just the little bit the insecurities and and sort of the what it was like to be gone from home. I think in a weird way, while all our friends were at college, we were touring the world, but I think there was a corollary there where it was like there is this loneliness and this self-discovery, and you're starting to experiment with everything, and then for me, Jack's Mannequin, it's there's a lot packed into Jack's Mannequin. I think if you're, in a lot of ways, it was the true coming of age project for me, right? That first record was, about my like that a painful breakup in your early 20s, which I think we all go through in our early 20s, right? Like that thing that just collapses, and but still but just hard partying and having fun, and I was like wild, and I had money to spend because I had done well with something corporate. um but obviously that project, what I expected that project to be more of the same, right? Like following that journey, but my cancer um really reframed that whole section of my life. And I think, you know tackling that in the Glass Passenger, and in a way in People and Things, as I started making my road back from my sort of recovery and my survivorship, the survivorship piece of my cancer. um the project just took a crazy turn, but so it's a lot about, it's a lot about surviving. I think really at the end of the day, I think the at the core of the Jack's mission was like conflict and survival, and how to make it out of that alive. And in a lot of cases, not doing it very well, personally, and it was a real crucible moment for me that lasted years. Um, but I think it's also what led to the wilderness portion of my journey, which was, knowing I needed to get out from under that, and get out from underneath my survivorship experience and start really living again. And I felt like disconnecting from Jax was essential to taking those first steps forward. And these records, I think, are really about personal exploration, about taking chances, about trying to keep both feet on the ground, having lived in a lot of ways for a lot of years without that. But using that mission of like staying centered and staying grounded, but seeking the adventure of life, and writing that into music, but trying at least as a mission statement to prove that you can have a family and you can be a good man that's not fucked up all day long, that can still make great music, and so it's really about trying to author like a version of an adult life that's still, where I can still keep my edge and keep my music exciting and fresh, and write about my family, and write about, I think a thing that a lot of people don't think is a sexy topic, which is like getting older and the things that you encounter along the way, and I have to embrace that because that's who I am, and I got to write from where I'm at.
Right. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the Dear Jack Foundation. So, tell us a little bit about it. Obviously, it's you mentioned your cancer, and thankfully you're surviving of it. But that's the genesis of the foundation.
Yeah, the thing about Dear Jack that I think is really important is that young people who are diagnosed with cancer don't generally have the same level of resources, aren't necessarily inclined to seek those resources, even if they're available. And so I think I know it is a quantifiably lonelier road than most people travel if you have cancer. As an adult, you may have family there to support you. You may have other friends who have been through it. You might be more inclined towards support groups, or just more well-adjusted because you've lived a longer life. When you're younger and you're a kid, you've got your parents there. You've got these systems in place. The children's hospital experience is, about as nice a hospital experience as you can have in a very hard time to be living through. But, you know, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, and so much of your life, I think, is still kind of up in the air, you know, whether it's your career, whether it's your relationships, you know, you're transitioning from high school to college to the working world. Um, and it's a really scary time to encounter cancer. And so what we've tried to do with Dear Jack is fill those gaps, because there is a huge sort of chasm in that young adult space for programming. So we have like a wish granting program. You know, we try to use that as a way to interact with patients and their families, and, you know, rather than just give them cool stuff, try and build experiences that we can kind of put on the horizon throughout their treatment, so that there are these bright moments to look forward to, even though you're going through a lot of hard days. And then the other program, which I'm really proud about, is called Breathe Now, where we bring survivor and their partner, and we get a group together. Usually it's 6 couples, and we offer people who are entering their remission, you know, a space to start rebuilding their relationships post cancer. It's something that, it's a program that we see it in action. And my wife and I are like, God, what if we just had this, right? Like, what if we had known that there were other people going through this, and had people to talk to, and had somebody to kind of map out, hey, here are the pitfalls and the successes and all the things you can find along the way, but you're not alone. And I think, you know, I'm really proud of what we've done at Dear Jack, because it really is about creating community for young people who often feel like they don't have one.
Yeah. Andrew, before we go, is there anything else you wanted to mention about the new record, or these dates, or anything else you have on the horizon?
I mean, look, I'm so fired up on this, with this music, you know, coming out. I think that it's an exciting new chapter. I just feel as ready as I've felt in so long to share new music with people, and to be out on a stage and out in a crowd and singing again. And I think it's going to be a really fun year, and I hope we get to see you all out at the shows, and March 31st, grab the music. I hope you enjoy it.
All right, Andrew, thanks a lot. I really appreciate your time today. It's great speaking with you.
Yeah, you too. Take it easy, man. Have a great day.
All right, bye.